because the story is less interesting and it's less covered, in part because everyone is still talking about Michael Jackson, or whether it's because the story is just much more complex than the events in Iran, which were also relatively complex, but the U.S. media, I think, managed to simplify them quite a bit by having Ahmadinejad as the bad guy and Mousavi as a good guy, and it's very hard to say what exactly is going on in China because it's driven by so many complex layers of history and ethnic conflict, and there is so little evidence about who initiated the actual killings that I think people are much less certain about expressing their solidarity with either group. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a really smart observation to note that we've just had a couple of incidents of major world events that could have been heavily covered via social media and could, beyond that, have been heavily amplified in terms of social media. So here's a couple of reasons why I think Iran dominated Twitter and the Uyghurs have not. First of all, you had a ton of people writing in English about what was going on in Iran, in part because you've got such a large expatriate Iranian population, and a lot of those folks got very involved with it. There's been a decent amount of discussion about the situation in Urumqi, but it's mostly been in Chinese. We don't have good Chinese-English machine translation, other than folks like Roland Sung and Rebecca and a few others who were doing translation around this. It's been pretty hard to get those sort of reports on the ground. Second, it took Iran a while to crack down on social media and Twitter, so it had a couple of days to get started, whereas the Chinese seemed to crack down on Urumqi very, very quickly. But I don't think those are actually the bigger factors. I think you're hinting at what this is really about. The Iran story, whether or not this is an accurate way to tell the story, very quickly turned into a good versus evil. Here is Ahmadinejad, he stole an election, he's a bad guy, he's crazy. Here's Mousavi, he's a reformist, he's going to change everything. I mean, anyone who's watched Iranian politics knows that Mousavi's no reformist. He's also not a good guy. I mean, there's a guy who, killed hundreds of people when he was in power. This is no one's idea of, clean, good government. But the situation in Urumqi is even far more complicated. You can't even come up with sort of two avatars. Who's on the good side, who's on the bad side. I think a lot of folks in the U.S. are sort of reflexively pro-Uyghur because they're reflexively anti-China, but then it bumps into our other set of prejudices, which is about Islam. And you suddenly go, well, these Uyghurs, they're Muslims, we've had a couple of them in Guantanamo forever, maybe they're dangerous. I think it's just much harder for the story to get traction. What really fascinates me as far as stories that have and haven't gotten covered, or have not become massive stories, is the Honduras story. There has been massive use of social media on both sides in the conflict in Honduras. You see Hondurans on both sides, either pro the ouster of the president or pro the restoration of the president, putting together YouTube videos. These guys have shown up. They showed up on Reddit for a while. One of these,
which is a popular social news site,
right? And is a voted social news site, which suggests that there were hundreds or thousands of people pushing these stories.